Hello everyone and good evening. My name is Don Arleth and coming live from Warsaw, you're watching World News Tonight here on TVP World. The UK and Germany signed the first treaty since World War II. With 17 areas of cooperation highlighted, it seems that Britain is rekindling its relationship with the EU after a bitter Brexit breakup. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, tonight's headlines. Newest EU budget proposal divides the bloc. Ukraine has first government reshuffle since Russian invasion. And Poland's new football coach puts faith in Robert Leandowski. The UK and Germany penned a historic agreement today in London. Security and defense and support for Ukraine and its reconstruction are the main areas of focus, but other provisions such as easing restrictions for travelers and cultural exchanges also made the cut. As the UK seeks to get a better footing in Europe, has Poland been forgotten? Our chief political correspondent Aaron Dahmen reports.
Signed, sealed and delivered.
This is the first agreement between our respective countries after the Second World War. We never had one. We had you in the European Union and we thought this is enough.
Germany and the United Kingdom putting pen to paper on a 23-page treaty on defence and migration, with promises ranging from mutually defending each other in case of an attack to a train connection between London and Berlin.
And I see it very much as evidence of the closeness of our relationship as it stands today, the strength of our values, the strength of our joint approach, but also very much as a statement of intent, a statement of our ambition.
Those ambitions are clear in Starmer's broader charm offensive with the EU as he aims to reset post-Brexit ties.
Thank you very much.
Just last week, French President Emmanuel Macron was also in the English capital, signing off on a one-in, one-out migrant deal to curb illegal crossings and agreeing to coordinate nuclear deterrence for the first time.
I have to say, the European Union was stronger with you, and you were stronger with the European Union.
And at the NATO summit in June, all three leaders met on the sidelines in The Hague.
We're seeing a pattern here, and this pattern is clearly designed to signal to Putin, don't think that you can split European nations from each other, don't think you can profit from Brexit in any security terms.
But with London, Paris and Berlin tying up deals, there appears to be one capital missing: Warsaw.
It's always a reason for Poland to be worried when, it's the destiny of Europe and its own position in Europe is somehow determined without its participation. And that things may be heading that way.
After almost 2 years of Poland's centrist coalition driving a pro-EU agenda under Prime Minister Donald Tusk, the surprise presidential election of right-wing candidate Karol Nawrocki may be throwing a spanner in the works as he gets set to take office next month.
Now there is a sense that following the presidential election in Poland, the current government is weaker. The diplomacy is unclear.
Other experts are less worried.
These bilateral treaties are reinforcing the solidarity that's already there, and Poland is totally part of European solidarity.
Reassurance at a time of uncertainty for Poland, Europe and the globe. Aaron Dahmen, TVP World.
The European Commission's €2 trillion long-term budget has elicited both criticism and celebration across Europe. Concerns mainly center on the size of the budget, but the need for the continent to arm itself, as reflected by the defense's sizable funding allocation, has been criticized for cutting too much into farming subsidies. Here's more from our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins.
Unacceptable. This was the words used to describe the European Commission's €2 trillion budget, outlined on Wednesday from the Belgian capital. It's the centrepiece of their long-term multi-annual financial framework. However, after they laid bare their proposal in Brussels, we've heard reactions from across the bloc, of course, the loudest being from Berlin. So we know that Germany is mostly against the proposal. Their criticism centres on that €2 trillion figure, with the budget expected to kick in from 2028, lasting until 2034. Now, this €2 trillion figure is a significant scale up from the previous multi-annual financial framework, which hovered at around €1.26 trillion. We've also heard criticism coming out of Sweden and the Netherlands, those frugal states there, also arguing that the EU should revise the figure down. They can be resourceful with a lot less money. Sweden also was particularly critical of EU funds going to countries that don't uphold the basic tenets of the European Union treaties. We know that Hungary has been accused of maladministration, and that funding will centre on whether certain countries abide by the rules of the treaties. Hungary has been accused of maladministration, but that country's Prime Minister was also critical of the budget proposal, describing it as pro-Ukrainian, with that country expected to receive €100 billion for its reconstruction as well as recovery efforts.
The Brussels proposal can be summed up as a pro-Ukraine budget, and its goal is clear as day. They want to take European people's money and send it to Ukraine. This Brussels plan is not even fit to be a starting point for negotiations. We suggest they withdraw it and come up with a new proposal that does not serve the interests of Zelensky in Ukraine, but the interests of Europeans and European farmers.
However, we heard praise coming out of France, with that country's EU Affairs Minister Benjamin Haddad stating that this €2 trillion figure, potentially with that number centring on security and defence, expected to receive a five-fold increase, with €131 billion afforded there. He said that this is a clear demonstration from the EU identifying its priorities, which is shoring up its own security. But this is not the end of the fight. The 27 capitals need to sign off on the multi-annual financial framework, that long-term budget, as well as the members of Parliament. So we're expecting at least 2 more years of heavy discussion, with those countries clambering for a bigger slice of that pot of cash. Angela Scugins from Brussels for TVP World.
Ukraine has appointed a new government in the biggest reshuffle since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. Outgoing Prime Minister Denys Shmyhal has been replaced by First Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Svyrydenko. Here's more in Franciszek Pilis's report.
With 262 votes naming Svyrydenko as the next potential Prime Minister of Ukraine, the 450-seat parliament then voted on whether to put her in the office. 22 votes against, 26 abstentions, and the rest in favor of officially making Svyrydenko the next Prime Minister.
Our task is to give Ukrainians all possible instruments to protect the independence and the life of Ukraine. We will fulfill this task.
The new government, headed by Svyrydenko, already has its work cut out for it. President Volodymyr Zelensky tasked the incoming cabinet with reviving Ukraine's loan-dependent economy and, most importantly, boosting domestic weapons production.
At the moment, almost 40% of weapons at the disposal of our soldiers have been produced in Ukraine. Within the next half a year, we expect it to be no less than 50%. The new Ukrainian government will audit all agreements, memorandums and deals with our partners in the sphere of defense and weapons production, in order to fulfill 100% of all projects in the interest of Ukraine.
Yulia Svyrydenko, who has plenty of experience dealing with Ukraine's American partners, pledged to act swiftly and decisively, adding that war leaves no room for delay in a post on social media.
Ukraine is to receive Patriot batteries paid for by Europeans, but other details of the NATO-US arms deal still remain murky. It's likely that missiles and munitions will be part of the package too, but it's still unclear which weapon systems. At the same time, Ukraine also emphasizes more domestic production is needed. Our defense correspondent Zuzana Jurek has the details.
One of the reasons that you're here.
During a bilateral meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, US President Donald Trump announced that Ukraine will receive Patriot batteries, paid for by Ukraine's allies as part of the US-NATO arms deal with Kiev. However, confusion abounds over deadlines, while Trump claims that deliveries are incoming.
They're already being shipped.
From what countries?
They're coming in from Germany and then replaced by Germany.
Let me see.
NATO's Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, General Aleksis Grinkiewicz, said on Wednesday that delivery details are still being ironed out. And as emphasized by Daniel Fried, the former US ambassador to Poland,
it's critical that the arms for Ukraine move now and that they move steadily. I'm concerned that the arms for Ukraine actually flow, because there was not a lot of detail in the announcement in the Oval Office on Monday.
Mark Rutte was also not exactly eager to divulge the scope of the arms deal.
First of all, that the US will now supply massively Ukraine with weapons out of the US, not just air defense, also missiles, also ammunition, paid for by the Europeans.
It is so far unclear what other kinds of missiles and ammunition will be included, especially missiles for the US-developed HIMARS system, which made its debut in Ukraine in May 2022. But as experts reiterate, American weapon systems are critical to meeting Ukraine's air defense needs at the moment.
The Patriot system is the most widely deployed system able to knock out ballistic missiles that the Russians continually attack Kyiv with. The Europeans do have another system, the SAMP-T, but they don't have it up in sufficient production to be able to make up the shortfall of a lack of American weaponry.
But though Patriots are necessary to combat tactical, ballistic and cruise missiles, these systems are too expensive to use against Shahed drones, commonly used to strike civilian infrastructure.
The drone can change altitude and direction, and we don't have enough of these kinds of mobile air defense units.
Shorter range anti-missile systems and anti-aircraft guns are necessary. Additionally, Ukraine will still lack proximity fuses for the missiles Kyiv uses to shoot down Russian drones, which the US redirected to Israel.
The use of this money should be confined to buying anti-missile missiles, and probably only done until such time as the SAMP-T can be deployed in Ukraine in numbers, and then we won't even have to rely on anything from the Trump administration.
Ammunition is vital too, but supplying it may not be most effective, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying that domestic manufacturing capacity is key to addressing this gap.
We will certainly continue to increase our own weapons production and develop all our defense projects, both Ukrainian and joint ones with our partners. This is one of the key priorities for the overhauled government.
155mm caliber artillery shells are particularly important, some of which are supplied by the US and Europe. Ukraine's partners, including Germany and the Czech Republic, are helping establish joint production facilities and transfer technology for the munitions.
Over 50% of the weapons that Ukrainians are using are being produced inside Ukraine. So that's a good development. Our allies who also invest in Ukrainian military defense sector so that we can produce more of Ukrainian-made weapons, because that ensures more independence.
For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
And it's just been confirmed by the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz that Ukraine will receive Patriot air defense missiles, quote unquote, very soon. Of course, we'll be keeping you updated on those developments. That final stretch to secure the 18th package of EU sanctions against Russia is being held up by Slovakia, by the Prime Minister Robert Fico, who says he's fighting for his country's energy security. But is he really? Jan Kennedy tells us more in his report.
Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico is once again blocking the EU's plans for a new 18th round of sanctions on Russia. Still, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas is not giving up hope.
I must say that we were really close to reassure Slovakia. The Commission has delivered what they asked for. Now the ball is in Slovakia's court, and we must get this deal done. It has been already 2 months.
The problem? Slovakia wants a promise that the EU's plan to stop using Russian energy by January 2028 won't disrupt its energy supply. And Prime Minister Fico says switching to other energy sources could hit Slovakia hard.
There will be a shortage of gas. Transit fees will be 2 or 3 times higher, and the price of this commodity will skyrocket. If the gas goes through several member states from the west to Slovakia, then transit fees will increase.
While Hungary hasn't officially blocked the sanctions, it's essentially in the same position. Despite receiving exemptions from the EU's plans to halt Russian energy supplies, both countries increased their reliance on discounted Russian gas pipeline deliveries from 57% in 2021 to 71% in 2024. But consumers haven't been the ones who benefited.
Slovakia and Hungary are struggling or not so keen to end reliance on Russian gas and oil. Like we mentioned, they purchase marginally discounted Russian gas, perhaps at about a 10% discount, and are not really reducing prices for the final consumer.
Levy says that the difference is pocketed by the intermediaries. To add insult to injury, both countries could phase out Russian gas as alternative supply routes exist, including an interconnector between Poland and Slovakia, which would be capable of covering the whole of the country's demand. Something similar happened with Russian oil, with experts pointing to the income of MOL, owner of refineries in Slovakia and Hungary, swelling by 30%.
So who is benefiting? Often it is government officials as well as companies, rather than actually seeing discounted prices for those consumers in Slovakia. And that can be seen that diesel and gasoline prices in Slovakia, pre-tax, remain at the same levels as their neighboring countries, if not slightly higher.
Some Slovakian politicians point to the example of the Czech Republic, which managed to successfully cut Russian energy imports without increasing prices.
The Czech Republic, a landlocked country, almost the same situation as us. They also did what they needed to. They also prepared refineries to be able to process oil other than Russian. They signed long-term contracts, both transit and supply, and today they have cheaper gas than us.
Last week, Polish-owned Orlen Unipetrol, the dominant player on the Czech market, announced that it has stopped refining Russian oil. Poland, meanwhile, replaced its Russian supply with deliveries from Saudi Arabia back in 2023. For TVP World, Jan Kennedy.
Who could imagine Poland's national football team without the country's best player, Robert Leandowski? One head coach has already found out and learned the hard way that this is simply not possible. Now, just days into his appointment as Poland's new head football coach, Jan Urban has pledged to bring the country's all-time top scorer back into the national fold. John Todd has all the details.
Meet Jan Urban, Poland's new national soccer coach, unveiling his name on a white and red shirt. But many are asking, will they see the return of an old name to the side? The country's record goal scorer, Robert Leandowski.
The most important task right now in front of him is of course, to speak with Robert Leandowski and to bring him back to the national team. And I'm pretty positive that it will happen.
The Barcelona star quit the squad early last month after former coach Michal Probierz stripped him of the captaincy and handed the armband to midfielder Piotr Zielinski. The move came 2 days before a 2-1 World Cup qualifying loss to Finland. Probierz resigned shortly after the defeat. Poland now sits third in their World Cup qualifying group, and Levy's return to the side is seen as key to reaching next year's tournament. Urban says that is his top priority.
We can't afford to have Lewandowski out of the national team. We have been to many tournaments recently, and it was Robert who, to a large, very large extent, helped us qualify for those tournaments.
Urban was a striker, earning 57 caps for Poland and netting 7 goals, before going on to coach for several Polish sides, winning the Polish Cup and the League Super Cup with Legia Warszawa. Analysts say he can speak with Lewandowski on equal terms.
He himself was a very good football player in the 80s and beginning of the 90s. He played in Spain. His famous hat-trick scored at the Santiago Bernabeu with Real Madrid. He will speak with Leandowski on the same level, so to say.
Poland's next World Cup qualifiers are against the Netherlands and Finland in September. Urban will be hoping for a win off the pitch with Leandowski before then. This is John Todd for TVP World.
Organizers of one of Europe's top festivals say that they will work through the night to make sure that it can go ahead as planned. Tomorrowland's main stage went up in flames on Wednesday night after years of design and construction. Our correspondent Alex Cadier is there for us and has the story.
Well, the situation at Tomorrowland is that organizers are still racing against the clock. They're looking at two scenarios. We heard from them just in the last few moments. One, if they are able to rebuild some kind of main stage overnight in the next few hours, the festival will go ahead as planned. Those tens of thousands of festival goers will be able to come here and have as full a Tomorrowland experience as they could hope for. If that is not possible, then they will envisage a different kind of festival. But clearly the message is very clear from the spokesperson we just heard from. They will go ahead irrespective of how. They will just have to find a way. But you have to see the difficulties, the challenge they have faced in the last 24 hours. It has been just a matter of hours since that stage was put out. 2 years in the making for the Tomorrowland main stage that went up in flames just in a matter of hours, and just a matter of hours before those first festival goers were supposed to be here. Now 38,000 people are already on site, and therefore the organizers say that those people for now are their priority. They are rushing to figure out how to get the festival back up and running. They hope to have the full Tomorrowland experience if they can. They still do not have an answer as to how this fire started, but certainly they say any steps they take now going forward will be focused entirely on safety and making sure the festival can go ahead. Of course, one of Europe's largest, 400,000 people over a couple of weekends. Some will be wondering whether or not they should now come. Clearly, the organizers say they are working as quickly as they can, and they want people to feel reassured that safety remains their top priority. In Boom in Belgium, I'm Alex Cadier for TVP World.
The UK-Germany treaty was signed today in London, the first bilateral treaty between the two countries since World War II. Closer cooperation on defense and migration, climate and the environment, economics and trade, as well as joint research projects. The agreement even included provisions for a direct rail link and easing restrictions on travelers. After the bitter divorce from Europe that was Brexit, the UK is making strides to rekindle its relationship with Europe's two biggest powers, first France and now Germany. And now joining me to discuss the current trajectory of Britain's relations with the old continent is Daniela Schwarzer, Executive Board Member of Bertelsmann Stiftung. Hello. Oh, there we have you. Okay, hello. Thank you very much for joining us on World News tonight. Now, defense and the war in Ukraine seem to have been the catalyst for this reset in the relationship. On this top line, what types of projects do you think that they are going to work on together, and just how extensive will this part of the relationship be?
Well, first of all, you're very right that the UK seems to be reconsidering its relationship with the European Union and its most important member states. Because the geopolitical situation on our continent has changed with Russia's war on Ukraine and the new security concerns. And so we have seen a number of bilateral initiatives by the UK government with partners in EU member states, but also the first UK-EU summit, which took place in May, which also, kind of was the kickoff for more in-depth discussions on the future relationship of the United Kingdom with the European Union as a whole. And now for the treaty between Berlin and London, I think there are several notable points. One is indeed in terms of defense cooperation, pretty concrete industrial projects on missiles, on armored vehicles and other elements where clearly and industrial interest is visible to cooperate, also to agree on export rules where Germany is more restrictive than other countries. And so here we see a step forward. And then there is a lot about people-to-people exchange, easier access to the UK and vice versa for citizens, school exchanges, academic and research connections. So it's not just a treaty that responds to the new security situation, but really a situation which I think is not of mutual interest between the UK and Europe, that working with the UK in economic terms and political terms and defense terms has become so much more difficult after Brexit. And finally, there's one element, which is migration, where both sides signed agreements to actually fight illegal migration flows across the channel, again, a topic of mutual interest. And so I think it's a pretty encompassing working agenda that both sides have set out.
Another provision in this agreement are that the two countries will co-lead the reconstruction of Ukraine and hold annual summits on the matter. Do you think that this means that Germany and the United Kingdom will seek to have the biggest piece of the pie when it comes to reconstruction in Ukraine?
I don't think it's about pieces of the pie at the moment, but about a strong commitment. Germany is, in terms of individual country contributions, the largest supporter of Ukraine at the moment, both in military terms and financial terms, and also in humanitarian terms. So there is a strong commitment. The UK equally have supported Ukraine since the outbreak of the war in very substantive terms. And I find it interesting that both sides now, in addition to supporting Ukraine to fight off Russia's attack, they think beyond and prepare for the reconstruction question. But this has to be seen as part of a larger effort. There have been various Ukraine reconstruction conferences. One of them took place in London, one took place in Berlin. But this initiative has traveled around Europe, and it's very important to have the buy-in of more countries, and in particular also Poland as such a close neighbor to Ukraine, France as well, which is the second largest economy in the Eurozone, so in the European Union. So it will have to be a joint European effort, and hopefully it comes to the moment where reconstruction of Ukraine really pushes to the centrality of the agenda.
Certainly. Now, when the current Polish government came into power, we saw many images of the four leaders getting together, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and Poland. Yet lately, we see just the big three. Is there anything that we can read into that? Has Poland been frozen out in some way, or in one way or the other?
I don't see any proof of that. I think also from a German perspective, and the German Chancellor said this very clearly when he came into office, he wants to bring Germany to a more central role in Europe. He believes strongly that although Germany is the largest economy and is going to be the largest defense spender in European comparison, it needs to work closely with neighbors and friends in the European Union. And interestingly, he mentioned two countries from the start, France and Poland. And during his first day in office, he visited both capitals, Paris and Warsaw. This was seen as a very strong and intended symbolic gesture. And of course, I think that the Franco-German relationship is closer by definition. Historically, it has been closer. It is supported by a very regular meeting schedule. And the German-Polish relationship still needs strengthening. And then there's also the trilateral format, which needs to be revived and can be filled substantively. So I hope that we reach a moment where that question from a Polish perspective doesn't need to be asked, because it has become natural that Germany's relationship with Poland are closer than they have been over the past years.
And we have about 1 minute left. I'd like to ask, Ukraine just had its first government reshuffle since the full-scale invasion. What are your thoughts on Kyiv's positioning at this time by making this shakeup in the government?
Yeah, I think the domestic political situation in Ukraine has become more complicated recently. Also a lot of criticism within the country, but also from the outside. And I do believe that this is an attempt to put a more functional government again into place and to fend off the criticism. But it remains to be seen how, under the very dire war conditions, this is going to work.
All right, Daniela Schwarzer, Executive Board Member from Bartelsmann Stiftung. If I say that right, thank you very much for joining us on World News tonight. We appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.